and now joining me, former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. Great to have you with us today, sir. Thank you for joining us. I want to start with just a little exchange, thank you, from Senator Graham today and the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, on this issue of what exactly connotes an attack on the United States. Watch this.
Does the Department of Defense have a definition of what a cyber attack against the United States constitutes?
I don't recall a specific definition.
So, John Ratcliffe, is that problematic to you?
It is. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about for a long time are establishing clear agreements on what the rules of the road are, so to speak, about what constitutes a cyber attack and what crosses into what would be an act of war or cyber war. And so, but if the leaders of the Pentagon can't articulate that to members of Congress, then we have real issues. And of course, the approach from President Biden to President Putin is just a bizarre strategy to give him a list of entities or sectors that essentially amounts to a target list. You give your adversary, listen, these are the things that we absolutely can't afford to have you go after. The strategy behind that really seems ill-conceived. So this administration is really not setting a clear picture for what the Russians will and will not be held accountable for, and that's going to be a problem going forward. I agree with Senator Graham.
Well, you're not alone in that assessment of that call from the president yesterday. The Daily Wire called it the most pathetic moment in U.S. diplomatic history. Here's that exchange and also a bit of response from President Putin as well. Watch this, everybody.
I talked about the proposition that certain critical infrastructure should be off limits to attack, period, by cyber or any other means. I gave them a list. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, 16 specific entities.
Most of the cyber attacks in the world are carried out from the cyber realm of the United States.
So President Putin says it's all coming from the U.S. Russia's not doing this. Director Ratcliffe, your response?
Well, if you're going to give Vladimir Putin a list, the list you should have given him was our list, our target list, and delivered with the message, look, if we get hit with another cyber attack, we're going to come after one of these entities or one of these sectors. Or an even better strategy would have been to take that action covertly before the summit took place. That way, when you talk to President Putin, he knows that you mean business and that you're going to enforce red lines and you're going to get better behavior. But of course, none of that happened. And as a result, really from a standpoint of the cybersecurity issue, nothing was accomplished. And at the same time, what Vladimir Putin got was a big political win.
It's very interesting. So you're saying that your strategy would have been to carry out a very targeted attack against a Russian entity prior to this meeting. And that would have just demonstrated, here's what we're capable of.
Martha, we specifically gave the NSA offensive cyber capabilities and the authority to act when appropriate. I think very clearly everyone would agree, in light of the conversations that are taking place on Capitol Hill, that now would have been an appropriate time to act and to send the proper message. So absolutely yes.
So would you consider the attack on the Colonial Pipeline and also on the JBS meat companies, would you consider those attacks on the country and not just specific companies because of their food and energy? That's what they do, food and energy?
So absolutely, those are what we consider critical infrastructure sectors. And so the question is attribution. And, if we have actual attribution regarding the entities that are doing that and whether or not there was direction from the Russian government, now they're denying that, but if we have that and we do have the capability to determine that, that would dictate an appropriate response. And we should be responding and using our offensive capabilities.
So are you surprised, as someone who was privy to all of that kind of intelligence? So if you had been in your position as DNI when those attacks happened, you're saying you would know, you'd be able to figure out how to link them back, because a lot of people have said they're just Russian hackers. They're not actually connected to the leadership in the Soviet Union. And Russia, excuse me.
We absolutely would know. The NSA are the best code makers and breakers in the world. They're the best at what they do. We would have those answers, but we didn't see those attacks on our critical infrastructure because, frankly, President Putin knew that President Trump wouldn't respond the way this administration has. It would have been a forceful response. And as a result, it's not a coincidence that these things are occurring, in the first few months of the Biden administration that did not take place during the Trump administration.
Very, very interesting. I mean, we know that President Biden has said that the intelligence agencies determined that there wasn't a direct link to the government. It'll be very interesting to see if more comes out on that, given the fact that there would be every ability for the NSA to determine an answer to that question. John Ratcliffe, former Director of National Intelligence, always good to have you with us, sir. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks, Martha.